Fremantle in silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And look, energy policy and the proper administration of our electricity system are critical to our future, to this nation's future. And the last thing we need is for energy policy to become a blackout blame game and for it to turn into an exercise in bringing your pet rock into question time. The member for Barker said that energy policy needs to deliver two things, and that's right. It needs to deliver secure and affordable energy, that's number one, and we also need a safe and stable climate, that's number two. We need to ensure that global warming stays below 2 degrees Celsius, and the only way to do that is to seriously reduce carbon emissions. The development of renewable energy, energy efficiency and storage technology is the clearest path to doing both of those things. And the greatest fraud, the greatest dereliction of responsibility in this place is for people to manufacture a conflict between secure and affordable electricity and renewable power. That is a fraud. It's a false dichotomy, it's dishonest and it's dangerous. What's the reality? Last year, carbon dioxide concentrations measured at the aptly named Cape Grim passed 400 parts per million for the first time. 2016 was the hottest year on record. The hottest year before that was 2015. The hottest year before that was 2014. The world needs to respond. It is responding. On the positive side of the ledger, the Financial Times reported last October that renewables have actually now overtaken coal as the largest source of power capacity on the planet. But as the world surges towards renewables, we are going backwards. In 2013, we were in the top 4 nations for renewable energy investment. Now we're well outside the top 10. In 2014, while global investment in large-scale renewables grew by 16%, in Australia it went backwards by 88%. We literally fell off a cliff when it comes to investment in large-scale renewables. We lost 3,000 jobs. If we'd maintained the trajectory that the Labor government was on, we would not have lost those 3,000 jobs. We would have added an additional 7,600 jobs. We know Australia's future has to include a mix of energy sources. We know, if we're honest with ourselves and if we consider the science, that that mix will include more and more renewable energy as time passes. The science tells us that. It tells us we need to make the transition sooner and more comprehensively. Our commitment under the Paris Agreement requires us to make that transition more quickly and more comprehensively. And the evidence of the Department of Climate Change and Energy to the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties was to acknowledge that our existing policies will not get us to our current inadequate targets. So we can argue about how fast and how far that transition will go. There are plenty of expert and not-so-expert views. I happen to like this formulation that was put forward in 2010, that Australia needs to move to, and I quote, a situation where all or almost all of our energy comes from zero or very near zero emission sources. That same public intellectual said, I promise you, you cannot achieve that cut without getting to a point by mid-century where all or almost all of our stationary energy from power stations and big factories and so forth comes from zero-emission sources. And the person went on to say, the zero-emission future is absolutely essential if we are to leave a safe planet to our children and the generations that come after them. In 2010, those were the views of the member for Wentworth, the current Prime Minister. In recent days, he suggested 50% is a bridge too far. His colleagues think 20% is a bridge too far. Now we're hearing about new coal-fired power stations and so-called clean coal when the business community says that the former is uninvestable and scientists say the latter is a fantasy. The reality is that the crises that we've seen this summer are not from a mix of renewables and non-renewables. They are from inadequate management of electricity supply. And even though my state of Western Australia is not subject to the vagaries of the national grid or the national regulator, we are at risk because we face the prospect of the privatisation of Western Power. We're at risk of seeing price rises, job losses, instability of supply that comes with the privatisation of our power system, and all that will be put at risk because of the $40 billion of debt that Colin Barnett has racked up. He's squandered the boom, he's run down the strongest economy in the nation, and now he needs to sell the farm. He said he would run surpluses. He promised he would build a rail line to Ellenbrook and introduce Max Light Rail. He promised he would never sell Western Power. Western Australia cannot bear any more broken promises. There's only one way to protect our public assets, jobs and power prices. It's time to switch off the Colin Barnett government.